President Archivist. And in looking at the attendee list, we have a big group today, and I noticed many familiar names from all across the states and several of our territories. Welcome to all of you. If you have not participated in a CIRI webinar before, and this is your first one, welcome to you as well. This webinar is sponsored by the CIRI Education Group and is funded by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We have a large continuing education grant, and they fund our webinars this year, and we're very appreciative to IMLS for their support. Today, our topic is going to be digital preservation in the cloud, benefits and considerations for state archives. And one of, I think, the good development that we've had in the CIRI program has been the ongoing collaboration with Preservica. They're one of the CIRI sponsors, and they've helped us with our continuing education programming. And we're thankful to them for providing our speakers today for our topic. Before we introduce our speakers and get into that, I'll just tell you a little bit about what's going on with CIRI and remind everyone that if you have questions, you can certainly put them into the chat feature through the WebEx software. You can choose to send them directly to Becky Juleson of the COSA staff if you have some technical issue that you need to discuss, or you can select all participants if you want everyone to see your question or your comment. A little bit about what's going on with CIRI under our leadership of Matt Beach from Kansas and Veronica Martzel from the state of Massachusetts. We've got a lot of good things going on with the State Electronic Records Initiative, including webinars. We have some planned upgrades to the portal, the PERTS portal. So do check that out and provide feedback if you have comments on the PERTS portal or have resources to add that you'd like to share with your fellow states and territories. We also have just started a new grant to investigate access to state electronic records. Who are stakeholders in access, and what other stakeholders have we not looked into? What other partners or collaborators are out there who could help us provide and work on the access piece for electronic assets? And in the education arena, the Education Subcommittee is planning additional webinars for this year. We don't have speakers nailed down yet, but do watch your email as we get those firmed up. We will send out email announcements. We're going to stick to that schedule of having them on the second Tuesday of the month at this time once we get those planned. In addition to that, also watch your email because we're hoping to have some additional information soon on using the remainder of our IMLS grant funds for additional student support activities in the education arena, and that might include some more training from other providers as well as from our regular CIRI series, and hopefully some conference training before our joint annual meeting this summer with NAGARA, and that will be held in July in Austin. So be on the lookout for more information about that. And that haven't used your existing scholarship money that is with the education grant, please make sure you give me an email, or you could email Becky Juleson or email Beth Shields. I'm happy to talk with you about use of that scholarship money for existing continuing education programs. And I think that's probably about all the news worth reporting from CIRI at the moment. And with that, I'm going to turn to introducing our speakers and let them take it away. Today with us, we have Michael Hope, who is a product marketing manager with Preservica, and he spends his time working closely with customers and partners to understand digital preservation needs and help shape product direction. Prior to coming to Preservica, Michael was at the leading France-based telecommunication provider, Orange, where he was responsible for international marketing for Orange's cloud-based infrastructure as a service product. Joining Michael today is Paul B. from Solutions Architect for Amazon Web Services Worldwide in the public sector. And Paul is the lead solutions architect for AWS GovCloud, which is in the U.S. region. In that role, he's working directly with customers and partners of Preservica and execute strategies to build cost-effective, durable, reliable solutions on AWS cloud services. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael and Paul.
Thank you. We just okay. I'll back up on slide. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah, and welcome everybody. It's also a real pleasure to be invited to present on the SERI webinar today on what appears to be quite an important topic for you all. My name is Michael Hope, and I'll be your host and presenter for today's webinar. And as I was saying, I'm also delighted to be joined by Paul Beder, who's Senior Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. Also join us in the background to listen to your feedback and requirements, and also help with some questions is Martin Springel, who many of you will know is the Preservica Product Director. So the aim of this session, take a pragmatic look at the benefits and considerations of using cloud and cloud storage for digital preservation, especially with respect to the needs of state archives. This is based on our experience of both developing a cloud service and also operating a cloud-based digital preservation service for the last few years, as well as the experiences and choices made by other state archives and by our other cloud customers and by Amazon's customers as well. Make things easy to digest and remember, we will look at requirements and considerations in a sort of form of a checklist, starting with what you should look for in a digital preservation system, whether it's in the cloud or not. Then move on to look at requirements and considerations for cloud storage if you're selecting a cloud storage service provider, and then finish up with looking at a checklist for selecting a cloud-hosted digital preservation service, and a break for summary and questions at the end. Firstly, I think we all know that digital content and records are fragile and come with their own particular challenges. They're susceptible to bit corruption and media degradation. For example, have you checked your CD-ROMs lately? Technology obsolescence, who remembers floppy disks, as well as file format and software obsolescence. So who remembers WordStar, for example? Accompanying the challenge, as we know, is the increase in volume and diversity of digital material that we're having to look after, both from digitization programs as well as the acquisition of born digital content. So all this means that digital content and records need special curation to ensure they are properly preserved, accessible, and more importantly, still readable and usable by generations. So this is a model which we use quite often to look at what requirements of a digital preservation system needs to be in order to provide that level of care for digital content. So it really is a top-to-bottom approach. Simply storing digital material in a durable way, and by that I mean having multiple copies in multiple locations, as Paul will describe a little bit later, which are levels 1 to 3 in this model. It's only really half the story, just storing it. You obviously then need 4 and 5 in this model to make sure that you organize and manage and create metadata and context for the content to make sure it can actually be found and made sense of in the future. As well as, most importantly, you have a proactive approach to managing and migrating file formats as they become obsolete, so that the content and records actually remain usable and readable into the future, which is the level 6. In fact, this maps quite nicely onto the OIS model, the Open Archival Information Systems Reference Model, which is ISO 14721. It actually has 6 core functions itself, including ingest, data management, archival storage, administration, access, and most importantly, preservation, planning, and action, which matches up quite nicely with layer 6 on the model. So one key requirement is for a digital preservation system is that it implements all 6 of these functions. And in fact, this is often a starting point out for a lot of organizations. They take the OAS model and you use that as a basis for the comparison between different solutions, as well as the core requirements for a digital preservation system. And that's the way that a lot of state archives that we've worked with have started out using the OAS model as a sort of starting point. I see here there are now around a dozen states using Preservica, both in the cloud and on-premise, to use cloud storage with the on-premise service. So that's the 7 you can see here, as well as 5 others which are just either in evaluation or we can't disclose them just yet. So there's interest and real movement in terms of using the cloud for digital preservation, and I'm sure that a lot of people at these state archives, and they'd be more than happy to discuss their choices in chose the cloud. And so experiences in using the cloud, and in fact that might make a good topic for a follow-up webinar in the future. The main reason for putting up this slide is to say there's a lot of useful resources for you to check out to be able to aid your decision. So there are case studies, as you can see there on Kentucky and views. There are new articles on Michigan. It was Michigan. Most recently, we were delighted to press release this library archive commission using Preservica, and this is particularly interesting because also chose to use encryption, which Paul will talk about in a short while, as well as to host on the AWS GovCloud platform, which Paul will also discuss. So many resources there, and hot off the press, some of you will already used the DPCMM sort of scorecard and process for assessing your digital preservation capabilities today, looking at governance, policy, processes, and systems. About a year ago, we announced a new white paper, which is called Achieving a Step Change in Digital Preservation Capability. You might even see the email about it. You can now download that, and that might also help in your decisions in how you go about building a trusted digital repository for your valued content and records. And in fact, there's also a webinar which we begin running on the 3rd of March as a follow-on to that as well, and you're quite welcome to join us on that as well. So looking at the sort of requirements model, what I'd like to zoom in on now is the durable storage element, and this is where Paul will take over and take through some of the benefits and considerations of using cloud storage for digital preservation, and then I'll come back and talk about sort of hosted cloud service after that.
Yeah, so having the ability to find and retrieve and generate useful information is only as good as the storage system that's underneath of it. And those who've been in the industry for a long time know that there isn't really any such thing as a single infallible piece of storage equipment. And so cloud service providers, including Amazon Web Services, invested heavily in creating more resilient, more secure, more stable file storage solutions than most organizations can make of their own. And so cloud is ideal for digital preservation and ideal from a number of different aspects. Number one, it's affordable in that you can enjoy the economies of scale of Amazon Web Services, as opposed to needing to negotiate storage arrangements and storage deals with vendors yourself as you go. So instead of having to spend an enormous amount of money for a storage area network or some type of fault-tolerant solution, which you may eventually fill up or may not fill up, instead you pay what you're using when you're using it. And you don't pay for that empty space that many storage area networks, as they anticipate future demand. Cloud is really scalable. There's an enormous amount of storage available in Amazon Web Services, more than our customers can use. But on-premise solutions, when you get to 95% utilization, and sometimes you have to figure out, well, I need to buy more storage, and unfortunately, I'm out of floor space, so I need to find more floor space somewhere, and then I need to find power, and I need to find networking to support all of this. In cloud storage solution, all of that is handled for you. You no longer have to worry about the physical manifestation of your storage solutions. And flexible and secure, we'll talk about in a little more detail on the next couple of slides. So durability is how long your information will last. Michael, if you haven't looked at some of your very early CD-ROMs, you may want to do that now. Most CD-ROM media vendors quoted lifetimes of anywhere between 25 and 75 years for CD-ROM media. And given that CDs became popular in the early 1980s and read-write CDs became popular in the 1990s, some of that information is at risk now. And many people attempt to compensate for that at-risk information by keeping multiple copies of it in different places. AWS actually distributes or shards information across a variety of locations, continually refreshes and checks the health of that information, ensures that it is every bit as readable now as it was when you put it in there however long ago you did that. And through of leading edge technologies, through the of scale, through our many locations, and through some special sauce that we bring to that, our most durable solution is what's called Amazon S3, or Simple Storage Service, AWS S3, and is designed to provide an average annual durability of 11 nines. So I'm not going to count the nines there on the slide for you, and I don't think you'll want to count them either, but 11 nines of durability means that for customers who have 10,000 objects in Amazon Web Services, that one of those objects might degrade or be lost every 10 million. And so that is not something that you can build on premise. Your disk drives, if you're prudent, need to be rotated every 2.5 to 3 years in a continuous fashion, and your optical media needs to be rotated, and magnetic media storage solutions are not even as tolerant as that. So that Amazon Web Services brings to the storage underneath of your archive management class leading. I have a flexibility. There are a couple of different service offerings. AWS S3, we call the lower latency option. You can store information there and retrieve it on demand, and the cost is quite manageable. In most cases, somewhere around 3.5 cents per gigabyte per month. We lower cost solutions. Was rarely retrieved, what some people call write once, read never types of data. AWS Glacier is the name of that storage solution. AWS Glacier has the same durability, but has a different service level agreement. When you attempt to retrieve information from Glacier, instead of being available immediately, the service level is somewhere between 3 and 4 hours for the retrieval of that information. Don't read between the lines that it's using some other media. It's just a different engineering solution. It's not written to tape. It's not done anything old school. It's just a different solution. But in return for that 3-hour or 4-hour retrieval service level agreement, the cost for storing data in Glacier is even less expensive at currently $0.01 per byte per month. I talked about earlier, it's pay as you go. If you store a byte, you pay for a byte. If you store a terabyte, you pay for a terabyte. You don't buy 100 terabytes and pay for all that 100 and only put 1 terabyte into it and hope you grow into it. Whether it's free or whether it's Glacier, you for what you use it. And secure primary concern for every organization, whether that is information that you don't want to disclose or whether information that you want to ensure has not been modified, tampered with, or stolen for purposes beyond what your original scope was. And AWS offers a variety of services, both the storage services and compute services, networking services, and other services. These are subject to an extensive set of controls which support our certifications. So AWS has, and this is a small subset, SOC Type 1 and 2 certifications, International Standards 27001 certifications. We have many retail organizations on top of our AWS infrastructure, of which Amazon.com is just one. And so that we support payment card industry certification for our services. We are active in the public sector space, including state, local, and education, and we support moderate. We have capabilities to go higher. We have FedRAMP authorities to operate. We support HIPAA and ITAR compliant architectures as well. And to that, we implement all those capabilities on the right, whether it's physical security, where we keep our actual infrastructure. Infra locations are not disclosed. We don't tell you where our data centers are. We have all of the customary fences, intrusion detection. We vet our employees. We control access to the building and to the physical infrastructure, all logged and audited. These are things that, to maintain a high security solution on-premise, you would need to do as well. But instead, we take care of that for you. This is actually a global solutions, web services solutions provider. We have teams around the globe, 4 here in North America and 6 in other countries. Are isolated from each other. One important function that provides is jurisdictions have specific requirements around the provenance, ownership, and privacy of their information. So information stayed in the European Union per European Union law has tight constraints and needs to stay within a region. And the upshot of that is you region you want to put your data in, and AWS maintains it there. If you choose to move it, we have that can help you move it, but we respect your data. Your data is your data, and it stays where you put it unless you choose to move it. An availability zone is the unit of fault tolerance. So things that you worry about: hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, landslides, natural disasters. Availability zones are designed to provide fault tolerance against those types of natural events, as well as fiber interruptions, power interruptions, and other unnatural phenomena as well. So by architecting on S3 and Glacier, which take advantage of multiple availability zones, you have distributed your risk across a variety of natural and man-made disasters to ensure those 11 nines of availability that AWS S3 storage provides. Extensive encryption options. If you encrypt data, if you have sensitive information or information that's subject to a release lifecycle, you want to make it doesn't fall into other hands, can encrypt your content. You can encrypt your content. We can manage your encryption keys. You can manage your encryption keys. There are a family of capabilities for securing your data, both rest when it's stored in an S3 bucket and in transit when it's moving from an S3 bucket, it's being distributed by a web application to an ender. So many encryption options protect your data and to ensure that only folks that you authorize have access to it. One of those AWS regions is a special region called AWS GovCloud. AWS GovCloud region was designed from the ground up to the needs of U.S. government entities, federal, state, and local. In particular, it supports a class of information called Controlled Unclassified Information, Executive Order 13556. That includes various types of cybersecurity, health information, critical infrastructure protection, and a special class of data called IR or Export Controlled Data. And to support that, the AWS GovCloud region is a little bit different. It is built by, staffed by, and supported by U.S. persons on U.S. soil. It has 40-2 level 2 hardware encryption endpoints, and it is not a sign-up, sign-in location. There's a process by which we vet individuals and organizations for access. To get access, you have to be a U.S. person, working entity, not necessarily the federal government, but any entity incorporated chartered, or lawfully doing business on URL, and generate credentials which are separate from the rest of AWS and provide us to the AWS GovCloud region. So the AWS GovCloud region is a U.S. persons only on URL community cloud for civ information. And the underpinnings that Amazon Web Services provides for the storage components of information management and preservation system.
Oh, so that's a very handy sort of checklist of some of the things you need to look for storage. And that's a good zoom into looking at security and flexibility, etc. This slide is really looking at how cloud storage can be used in conjunction with digital preservation, because there's a number of ways it can be used. Firstly, for larger institutions that maybe have in-house resource, then they might want to look at having what we call a hybrid model. That's where digital preservation software is actually hosted on-premise on their own servers, and then utilizes local storage within your premises. It can also be hooked up to cloud storage as well. And we got customers in this model for a number of different reasons. One is for extra redundancy, as Paul was saying. It's quite a way to have multiple copies in multiple locations is to use the cloud instead of trying to replicate that in-house. And so they use the cloud as an extra level of durability for certain types of content. Other customers are looking to, they built up very large tape storage systems in-house, which are pretty costly to manage and run. Our biggest customers go up to 6 petabytes of content, and so that it makes sense to look at more cost-effective solutions. And one solution is cloud storage, and in particular, as Paul was saying, Amazon and Glacier. Others, it's a way of splitting their content by classification. So they might be looking to keep sensitive or confidential content in-house, on-premise, inside their own firewall, but then have other more open content in more cost-effective storage media in the cloud. So that's the sort of the on-premise model. For smaller institutions which have more limited IT resources and IT support, then the full cloud-hosted solution might make more sense. This is effectively where the preservation application itself is hosted in the cloud, connected to the storage options at the back end, as you can see there, Glacier S3. So everything is handled and hosted in the cloud. So all of the operations and installation of new software, level maintenance of the servers, optimization, everything else is handled for you, which means you just practically a web browser and a small client piece of software to be able to ingest, and it's a very cost-effective getting started, and with less capital expenditure up front. So what I want to do now is just drill into, and with it, having a fully cloud-hosted service brings its own set of requirements. So what I'll do is just have a look at those considerations and requirements. I've broken them into 3 areas. So if you're selecting a cloud-hosted digital preservation service, then you look out for these types of functions and features and architectural capabilities and commercial capabilities to make sure you're getting the best solution. So just ticking off on the architectural list. And I think, as I said at the beginning, make sure that any service you're looking at is actually OIS digital preservation, and it's not just a bit level storage solution as we looked at in the model right at the beginning. Just storing content at a bit level is only really half the story. Next, make sure any solution that you're looking at is actually architected, tested, and proven to run in the cloud. There's certain things you have to do to the application itself to make sure it's properly architected. For example, one example is see if other Amazon services, if it's hosted in the Amazon cloud, are being used. There's RDS, where metadata can be held for really quick access and quick indexing of your content. And there's a whole host of a myriad of other architectural considerations to ensure that the application sits nicely on the cloud service, which could be in its own right. This also means that if it is architected properly, then you and users should never know about the infrastructure underneath. It is possible to take some applications and load them into the cloud, but they also then if it isn't a fully hosted service, and you end up having to operate it, manage it, configure it, and optimize the service yourself, and allocate time and resource to do that at quite a low level, and that's time I'm sure is better spent task of curation and digital preservation of your content. Service that you're looking at or viewing or carrying, as we've seen, has durable storage on the back end, copies, multiple locations, self-healing, and integrity checking of the content on the way in and the way out. And that's really one of the big reasons for looking at the cloud for digital preservation, is the collective nature of that. Also, is content secure? I think Paul talked extensively about storage security and the security of a service like Amazon EC2 and compute services, but also make sure you're looking at a complete multi-layer security. So you have storage, the infrastructure itself, and then that the application that you're looking at has extensive security. So you can control, your administrator can control permission levels and access rights to your content, right the way down to an individual collection or an individual record level. And that becomes particularly important if some of that content you want to share with the public. You want to have the confidence that, you want to stay internal, stays internal, and the content you share publicly is what let's see. So that summarizes the architectural list. I'll leave that up there for a few seconds before we move on to look at some of the sort of key features you need to be looking for in a digital preservation system that's sort of hosted in the cloud. Paul was saying you have different types of content, different types of storage for different types of content. So your presentation copies and your frequently accessed low resolution copies, for example, of JPEGs, you might want to store in a low latency service, and then your high resolution original master copies like TIFFs or big WAV files, you might want to just put them away into a lower cost infrequently accessed storage service like S3. So make any any digital preservation that you're looking at makes it very easy to set up storage policy and management, and has integrated connectors to the end to allow you to automatically push different content in different places. When you get into the cloud, then another requirement becomes thinking about having the collection management view, the patient, and the public access all in one system, because that can help reduce need to have integration between different systems, performance issues by having multiple systems, one for access, one for preservation, and also the people and the money effort involved in running two separate systems. So that becomes even more important when looking at running this in the cloud. Another consideration in terms of performance in the cloud is to make sure that any system you're looking at has what we call side rendering, which basically means that any content you want to share internally or with your public access is accessed by multiple devices, so smartphones, tablets, and PCs, without those devices having to have the native application installed, because the digital preservation platform itself is actually rendering those files for that device. Another good reason, obviously, is to minimize the amount of content which is being downloaded across the network and into other devices, because you can actually render that on the server itself. Another consideration is to think about how you're going to get your content in. So look for a service which has efficient ingest tools for uploading metadata, as well as your content well, and across the network. And consider also a service which has capability to do a large file uploading option, if you're looking at tens or even hundreds of gigabytes at a time, for a service which can do that in the background, made from a local server, and load that into the cloud in the background, so it's not tying up your local PC or your local desktop. Consideration is to think about content retrieval. So you obviously want to get it in, but you might have a need to get the content out, either at the end of service, if you decide to close down your contract, or you might simply want to retrieve content on a day-to-day basis. So look for tools like we have in Preservica called the Copy Home tool, which you can set up as one of your storage connectors and your storage adapters. So every time you copy content into the cloud, it will also make a copy for you, on a QFTP server, which can be probably anywhere, but it can also obviously be within your own location. That's one way of using it. The other way is to use that retrieval tool, as I said, if you want to do a bulk download of content and metadata, if you decide to leave a particular service. Very quickly, the feature checklist. So just touching up some of the crucial considerations, and Paul has got some of these. So if you're looking for a cloud-hosted digital preservation service, can you specify where your content is stored? Yes, at least with Preservica, because Preservica is hosted in the northeast region in the US, and also we have a location in Europe if you want to host your content and service over there as well. So yes, you can specify that and you operate within a particular jurisdiction. How should you treat confidential content? We've seen a number of options for that. So could be having keeping a confidential material on premise and using the cloud for more public material, or it could be taking high levels of optional encryption, which we can do with Preservica, or even having, as Paul was saying, having your service hosted in the optionally hosted in the Amazon GovCloud. considerations on the checklist. So Paul talked a little bit about compliance and standards, but just a list. So I've talked about OIS. There's also 16363, Trusted Digital Repository standard. Sure that as we're looking at, with that. And also, if somebody else is developing a platform, make sure it's being developed to ISO standards, ISO 9001. So there's professional development behind the software you're using. Big thing, one big question we often get asked, and people are concerned about, is there a cost to get content out if you decide to leave at the end of contract? I think you can guess there by the big zero that at least Preservica, there is no cost to, there's no penalty to take your content out if you decide to leave the service. Talking about service and contracts, it's always good to any service you're looking at. It's always to have a single contract and an actual commitment for the entire service. So that's looking at what availability levels are going to be provided, support, operations, what backups are going to be done, what's the maintenance policy, privacy, fair use, etc., etc. And it's always nice to have that in a single contract rather than have multiple contracts with different providers if you're trying to pull a service together. But look for those elements. You want to ensure that you bring all of that together is also affordable. So it's the service operation, the support, the maintenance, the software itself, and the infrastructure and the storage together as an affordable package. The checklist, that was a very quick run through on some of the considerations. Obviously, you're going to get a copy of the slides at the end of this session as well, so you'll be able to refer back to some of these checklists and maybe use them to guide some of your decision making. So just in the digital preservation in the cloud, as we said, it's ideal for digital preservation. It's durable, it's affordable, it's scalable, and hopefully Polish news also extremely secure. Cloud storage, as I've said, is not digital preservation. It's just this level storage. You need to have the other layers added in to show you've got findable and also usable content in the future. Preservation with access on the one platform is vital for sustainability of a lot of archives. So look for that as well. None size fits all. Seeing different options, different ways of going about hosting service, digital preservation service, using cloud storage, and also having optional increased levels of security. So there's no one size fits all. And use the checklists. So make sure anything you're looking at meets architectural, technical, and commercial considerations. And just one final point to dwell on: cloud's not new. Cloud's been around for a long time, and in particular, cloud and cloud storage is already being used extensively for digital preservation, and in particular, as we said beginning, at up to a dozen 8 archives already. So we move on to questions. A couple of practical next steps. If you haven't seen Preservica in action, then you might want to join one of our live demos. You find even more resources upon our website into what is digital preservation and other white papers. And as I said, the new DCMM step change paper. And also on the Amazon website, if you're interested in digging deeply into cloud security or in digging deeply into looking at all the compliance levels that the Amazon service provides, then there's some links there for you to go and look at. And then the last thing, we're looking forward coming to Austin, Texas in July, where we're going to be at the COSARA joint annual meeting. So we look forward to meeting a lot of you there. And thank you for your time. And now to questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation, and I'm glad we have some time for questions. You can put your questions either into the chat or the question and answer. Please be aware that with the way the WebEx software works, it's kind of two different places to watch. So we've got some people watching for your questions. And I believe we already have a couple from Glenn in Kentucky, and they specifically are about the AWS GovCloud service. Might be a question more for Paul, but can you provide worldwide public access to records stored in the GovCloud? Is it just for U.S. government, state and federal? And then is there any extra cost for the GovCloud service?
Happy to answer that. Information that you store in AWS GovCloud or in any AWS region is controlled by what Amazon calls the shared security model. So we know exactly what your data is and how you use your data, and with whom you share it is up to you. So if you store your data in the AWS GovCloud region, and if that data is controlled for export purposes, it is your responsibility also to ensure that it is not shared worldwide. If, however, you have a website in AWS GovCloud and in there you put public documents freely releasable to anybody in the world, you set it up so that anyone can visit that website via public IP address from anywhere in the world and retrieve that information. Your data, your decision about where it lives, your control over who has access to it. And to evangelize a tiny bit, AWS has solutions architects who work with our partners like Preservica to help implement those kinds of control solutions. So if, for example, you share it with the U.S. public and have reasonable assurances that it's to IP addresses and service providers on U.S. soil, we help you build those kinds of solutions. But data stored in GovCloud can be shared publicly with a capital P if you want to. And just for U.S. governments, the requirements are U.S. person on soil working for a U.S. entity to obtain access to the GovCloud region. Beyond there, your business drives it. So state and local can be in GovCloud. We have independent software vendors like Preservica that provide solutions that run on AWS GovCloud. As long as the requirements for access, then your responsibility determines who you can share the information with and what you can do with the service. The other area is there an extra cost for GovCloud services? All AWS regions have different price points. There's an AWS simple monthly calculator that will tell you what the cost is. And AWS GovCloud is, if I recall correctly, about $0.5 a gigabyte a month more expensive than US East, but less expensive than other regions like, for example, US West 1 or Sao Paulo, Brazil, or Tokyo, Japan. So costs vary from region to region. AWS GovCloud is typically about 10 to 20% more expensive than US East, but less expensive than some other AWS regions.
Okay, Paul. I mean, from a Preservica perspective, as I mentioned, Texas Archive is now looking to use Amazon GovCloud. I have Preservica hosted in the AWS GovCloud, and that's an option that we do offer and can discuss with you as well.
Another question about checksum. Checksum is an important component of the OAIS-based preservation plan. What are Preservica and Amazon doing to maintain the integrity of the checksum even while or after the data has been encrypted?
Okay, Martin, if you want to sing in here. Martin? No, he might have dropped offline.
Okay. In the meantime, if we're waiting for him to come back on, you might answer, is it easy to move from S3 to GovCloud?
S3 is in the U.S. standard region, which covers U.S. East and both U.S. West. There is S3 for each of the other regions and a separate S3 for AWS GovCloud. And the motion between S3 in the U.S. standard region or S3 in U.S. East and in AWS GovCloud or vice versa, there are a lot of tools that can do that, both third-party vendors, and you can use the AWS command line tools and APIs to build your own tools if you're so inclined. And many application vendors incorporate AWS Software Development Kit capability into their applications to facilitate moving between different AWS regions. So there are many ways and many ways to move between different instances of S3.
Okay.
It's just telling me that his audio has died, which is why we didn't hear from him. So maybe we can move on to some other questions and get reconnected.
Okay. And in the meantime, we can always answer a question also on the Siri listserv if we need to have a more full explanation of something. If we run out of time. So we won't table that question forever. If we don't get to it today. Are there other questions about cloud storage or the checklist that that Michael went over, the architectural feature or commercial checklist? I'll have a quick question. I'm not exactly sure how to articulate this, but are there instances, particularly in the GovCloud, where you see agencies or state agencies using the GovCloud for records that might be more of a records management environment? We focused a little bit on the preservation end of things, but I know in North Carolina we've done work thinking through how to advise agencies or other state agencies that are thinking about just cloud storage in general and the records management functionality that might be built into that. Is that something that's being used in the GovCloud area?
So records management functionality itself is something that occurs in applications like solutions that Preservica provides. AWS doesn't have records management as service. We do have lifecycle policies, but those policies are around, has the document, and it's undifferentiated. It's a set of bytes. Has this particular entry in an S3 bucket been here for more than 9 days? If so, automatically lifecycle manage that into Glacier. But it's a function of the content inside of it. It's a function of primarily age-related rules that you set for aging content from one storage medium into another. On top of AWS, in EC2 applications, will do run typical document lifecycle management solutions, whether those are built on top of, for example, a Microsoft SharePoint platform, or whether they use third-party solutions for document lifecycle management. Yet those then interface down into the AWS infrastructure.
Okay. We had another question. Business technology rumor has it that Glacier currently uses Blu-ray optical storage technology, which explains the delay in access and very low cost. Any comments?
I can tell you that no, Glacier does not run on optical technologies. We do have secret sauce and special engineering, which I cannot tell you what it is, but we don't like to let rumors propagate. No, it doesn't use tape. No, it doesn't use Blu-ray optical. It uses special sauce that's AWS intellectual property and innovation.
Lacey already has a question if it wasn't answered yet.
Oh, didn't see that. Do you want to read that one?
Yep. What do you mean by integrated storage connectors in the feature checklist?
I think Martin's dialed back in, but he can't. I'm not sure he can actually speak. So within any digital preservation system is want to take advantage of different storage for different types of content. An example, then it's good to look for a service which provides connectors which are integrated into the service. So you might have and some policy management, so you can set up where different content goes at time of ingest, so it becomes very automated and very automated. So basically, looking at using putting presentation copies into low latency storage, putting large file preservation copies into lower cost storage, or you might want to store some stuff locally, some stuff in the cloud. So it's having a service which has recognized that and has that capability built in, and has the ability to either have connectors already pre-built, like for an S3 or for Glacier, or it becomes easy to add connectors for other storage, local storage or cloud storage media you might want to be using. Hope that.
Okay. Another question following up on what I had just asked about. In terms of workflow, if the files are put to Glacier after 90 days and then it comes back to process the files, how are those two connected afterward?
Cycle management policies that take information out of S3 and put it into Glacier have a complementary interface where you request retrieval of data from Glacier, which then comes back to S3 for your access. You don't directly access the data stored in AWS Glacier. One caveat I would put in there is that when we showed the slide which talked about low latency versus very low access, the cost model for Glacier is very, very inexpensive storage on the order of $0.01 a gigabyte a month. The cost for Glacier is two-part. First, it's in delay in retrieval in the 3 to 4 hour time that it takes to get information back into S3. But in that exception for a certain level of noise, there's a cost for retrieving lots of information from Glacier. So Glacier for information which you may not read or for which you intend to have others pay the cost. For example, court evidence documents, video, where sooner or later the process will incur the charge for that. But don't treat it like I'm going to just put stuff in and then pull it back whenever I want to. You need a more nuanced information flow policy which is the cost differential and the different cost model, which is low cost storage but more expensive retrieval, to make sure that you have the optimal solution.
Okay. Missed, or anyone else have questions? Okay. Well, and I will just say, as we're wrapping up, I want to definitely thank our two speakers today, and thank you to Preservica for continuing to support our education efforts within CIRI, including our speakers today. And as always, at the end of our webinars, we have evaluation. It's just a couple of questions to make sure that we're hitting your needs in terms of continuing education. So it's a good opportunity to give us some feedback, and also let us know if you have a topic coming out of this webinar that we could follow up on for a future webinar. We'll always read your evaluations and do take them seriously, so take a minute to provide us that feedback. And as was said earlier, you will have access to the slides, and one of those slides that we just saw included a link with some email addresses or website addresses for Preservica and Amazon if you had additional questions. Anything else, any other questions that have occurred to you in the last 30 seconds? Well, first on the line. There's nothing else. I want to thank everyone for your participation today. And again, thank you for sharing with us from Michael and Paul, and for your slides and your information. So do take the evaluation and be in touch if you have other needs from CIRI. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.